Hello, everybody. I don't like this light. I'm gonna turn on the light here. Let there be light. Let's get some light on here. I am in my other office because my other office is being used. And that's why I'm late today. So, we're pretty busy. Good to see everybody as though I'm seeing you right now. And I apologize for being late. I'm My son, who's now kind of an associate, is doing help. So that's what we were doing, is getting him situated with a client, and I'm over here. Well, a lot to talk about. Um, yeah, it's like life gives me things to talk about. This dental thing I had 3 weeks ago today is still numb. So my joke was, maybe God doesn't want me to be able to talk so much or eat so much. I thought that was funny. I think we have to be careful that we make things out of things. But I think it's to learn patience. And I woke up kind of upset with the dentist company. I didn't talk with anybody. I called them 5 times, but never really talked to a dentist or a dental hygienist or a dental assistant or anything. And the oddness with that is that I thought, why would, if I had someone with a numb tongue and it's really rare, wouldn't I just want to talk with them to calm them down? So I was carrying a resentment about that. I Yeah, this is a good story to share. I then got up. I thought, well, I don't want to be. And they said yesterday, well, just talk to him when you're in the chair. And I'm thinking, why would I want to talk about this when I could be potentially frustrated and angry or frightened to hear what he's going to say? And then they're going to stick another needle in this side. I thought, this is not making sense. So I decided to call. I left a message, and then thankfully it said, to erase and re record. I thought, thank you, God, because that's what I needed to do. I just left no message. Thought, I'll just ride this out. I talked to the dental assistant, who was apologetic, very good at listening, just very good at listening, calmed me down. I wasn't really that angry, but at that time, I just thought, Erik, you can shift your state enough to go from sharing your concerns to then shift to now open your mouth wide. I'm still kind of numb. This is better, but this is still numb. Um, yeah. And I did, by God's grace. I was a little bit afraid of, well, could I really, what I know about anxiety and anger, it's like a molecule. When you start putting a whole bunch of things, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight, is you have too much stuff, too many things going on at once. It causes problems. And that's what I was thinking. Here I am at 10 o'clock this morning going to talk about how I felt a little bit concerned that I didn't think that handled it well, and then open my mouth and all that. Nope, I was able to shift gears, but um, I have also issues with trying to work out family difficulties with my mother, who's older and at home, and then church related, what I call challenges. So when you start to stress, collect stressors, where you're dealing with 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 things, you're not going to do anything too well. I just believe that. So we have to just sort of take apart the molecule, take one thing at a time, deal with that one thing. And I've been reading spiritual literature on this, and they say that's what you want to do. Just take one thing at a time. And I also believe not rushing. Just rushing usually is, for me, trying to do too much in too short a time, too high of expectations. How does this harm us? Um, it harms us through overusing our nervous system. We just wear it out. And I say we. I'll say I wear myself out by doing too much nervous system stuff. So we all need downtime. We all need time away from the cares of this world. I do love prayer and relating to God in that way because it seems like a moment of peace. The church I attend, the same experiences. I can blot out all the things that I have going on. I say I can. I'm not perfect at it, but that's the intent. There's a part in our service where it says, let us, we who are, we'll just say at this time in the service or the liturgy, we are to lay aside all the cares of this world. It's a good phrase. It's a good phrase. We're coming 2 weeks into an election here, which people are having nervous energy around this. They really have, some of them have done the math and think that whatever party wins, is it really going to be a win? You know, is it really? In this book, which we've been spending some time in, it says, as in war, the victor only seems to win. So I'm concerned about whatever side wins. Will it really be a win? Or will there be people very unhappy, very upset about this whole experience? I can't just speak about this. And I know this is Tuesday night comfort hour, but I think this is really useful. It's been useful to me. I've been a therapist 30 years. I did work with, for a while, divorced parents. I was a guardian ad litem, in fact, which for the state of Washington, I would be the one who would do an investigation. I did not like this work. I thought it was fun to get the training. I thought it was interesting. But to go into people's homes, to ask them questions, to see their nervousness, to then write up what is in their best interests of the child. Yeah. And I'll be honest, I did that once. The irony is that I had testified in court before. It was a 4-year process. They paid me a lot of money. They sent me to talk with some of the world's experts on the effects of divorce on children. And then the court asked me, what is your findings? And I wasn't even the child's therapist. My job was to explain to the court, to educate the court in a respectful manner, how should these proceedings go, and the role of guardian ad litems. Since then, the law changed. My testimony is actually on the appellate court books in the state of Washington. La-di-da, so what? What's weird is when I go to get the guardian ad litem training, because I wasn't even a guardian ad litem, I'm reading this famous case and there's my name in that. It's so weird. Who could I tell without sounding arrogant and look at me? But I did share with the instructor. I said humbly, whatever that means. It just was weird. You just feel like you want to. Yeah, it was just bizarre. But I say all that to say that I learned what I did not want to do. I'd rather be part of the solution. And so after that, I worked with parents who were really at odds with each other. And I'll get to the point of how this relates. And I did this for a while, and some of it was really, really, really rewarding. Some of it was like a nightmare. A nightmare. Yeah, a nightmare. There were people who the court had said, you need to see Erik. So the daughter would come into the room and the mom would cry loudly in the waiting room, hysterically, because she did not want this process to happen so that the daughter could visit with the father. And it's like I had to tell her crying loudly is getting in the way of the therapy. It was just, you can't force these things with court orders. And I have little patience with the parents who have such animosity towards the other one, that then what happens is you have kids trapped in the middle. And yeah, it's not a fun experience. So I would stiff arm them and tell them that I was looking only for the interests of their children, and that I would just be honest with both of them. And I didn't think I wouldn't even take them unless I felt like they were teachable and had the ability to really get what I'm getting at. Is I would say, look, 10 years from now, and if the kid was 5, I'd say they'd be 15, or if they were 15, they'd be 25. What do you want what do you want your child or your son or daughter to say about you during this experience? Because we get so short-sighted. There would be hardly a conversation where they just didn't have such venom towards the other parent. There were apology letters from a father that said, "I'm sorry that your mom was such a," I'm exaggerating, but not really, and I don't want to divulge exactly, but, "I'm sorry your mother was such a wicked witch that she made me drink." I mean, I said, "That's not gonna work." But that's how he saw it. And then I would get a certified letter from him firing me. Great, I guess. I mean, and then after all was said and done, that turned out to be a really good experience. I tried to avoid those things. I hardly work with them anymore. But my point is having had years of that, not all 30 years, but a lot of years of that, I can't help but draw the parallels by what I see today going on between two political parties. Their inability to even have a conversation without such venom. They think that they're actually right, and they think that they're actually going to help anything. What little do they realize that the people they are hurting is us. And just like in a dysfunctional home where mom and dad, and I've used this metaphor before, so I think it just, and I'm not trying to pick on either political party, but say like the dad's more the Republican and the mom's more the Democrat, that you have one side coming really harsh, and you have another basically enabling little Tommy's behavior. Well, till now he has troubles with the law, and the mom just can't imagine her little Tommy is doing anything wrong, and the dad says, "We need law and order." And she's saying, "How dare you? It's all your fault. That's why he's rioting in the streets." And it's like, no, you're just so lenient. You're enabling this behavior. So that's what we have. We have then some of us just rioting in the streets, trying to do something so outlandish till finally two parents will actually get together and put their foot down lovingly and firmly, hopefully together, linking arms, saying, "Look, we love you, Tommy, enough to go, no, don't do this. You're really going to hurt your life." But it's amazing how I have people that the kid was in the hospital, and they're going to fight at the hospital, blaming each other for the kid trying to kill himself. And I'm the unlucky one to say, "Look, I think it's the way you guys interact with each other that's causing such harm." So, and when kids suffer like this, often I say to the parents, either you guys are going to change. If you're going to change, then there's some hope. If you guys look like you cannot change because you're so addicted to pointing the finger at the other, these are the symptoms of it. So addicted to pointing the finger at the other side. Horrible miscommunication. Like, some of this stuff is not rocket science, but such horrible communication that it's miscommunication, or we could even call it fake news even. So that either Tommy is going to do worse and worse and worse stuff to try to up the ante to get the family to work together. In this theory, it suggests that Tommy is the symptom of the family's dysfunction, that it's not mom's fault, it's not dad's fault, it's not Tommy's fault, it's the family system's fault. And if you change the family system, from going to such bitterness. And often there's fear running all this. So it's not like people are so much bad people, but there's such fear underneath this that it turns into power struggles. Um, and then people may feel justified in exaggerating for an effect. They go to the court and they exaggerate things. Well, then that usually doesn't work well. Um, and what are the other symptoms of this? Well, let's talk about when it works well. That if mom and dad, this sounds sad to say, but maybe it's 10% at the time, I can sense that there's hope here, and then we work with it. Mom and dad become convinced that I'm really going to be, it sounds funny, but mean to them both. I'm not trying to be mean, I'm just trying to be honest. And they actually appreciate that in a strange sense. They say, you're not like any other therapist. Well, this is not like normal therapy. Therapy, I like comfort therapy. I like to make people feel better, not make them upset. But when they're convinced that I'm helping Tommy, who was cutting his wrists or doing something, really acting out this frustration, when Tommy begins to get better, mom and dad start to work together as a team. They don't always have to agree on it, but they have to agree on what they can agree on, which is Tommy needs help. And to have Tommy not be blown up in the middle of it, they have to be diplomatic. And I often use the metaphor of like the two countries. They have to work together. Otherwise, everybody gets blown up. And one may think they're winning, but yeah, it's not really going to win in the long run. The other option, it's a sad option, is stay away from mom and dad. And once they realize, and I don't really say that, they come to their own conclusion. And they may be closer to one, but then once they start to see the facts about the negative things that were said about the father or the mother, the facts will come out. They'll start to think for themselves, and they will go, wow, I was manipulated by the media. I mean, my parents. That was an intentional slip of the tongue. So how do we apply this to ourselves? Well, one option is we stay away from it. We just go, look, my life, how much is my life really going to be affected by an election, realistically? It could be. But I think that's one option. The other option is that we try to be part of the solution, to appeal to anybody who will listen, this idea that this is systemic, that there's something we could do to build bridges with each other, to accept, I wanted to say, accept tolerance as a way of living. Like, it's okay to not agree with someone's religion or their even political beliefs, but having the ability to respect that that's what they believe, and that's what they their life experiences has helped them get to that place, to that's what they believe, and to see that there's a positive intent behind what they believe. The mom in our drama may only be so comforting because the dad is so harsh, and vice versa. The dad may be harsh because he's really afraid that mom is bringing him cookies and in prison, and he's not going to learn his lesson. And so I think softened language helps in general. Sometimes we need to be direct, but to use softened language. I'm old enough that before Phil Donahue and some of these talk show hosts, people were politer, and I'm not blaming anybody. It's just my experience is that people just didn't say what they thought. When there was a talk show, people just listened to the guests, and it was not provocative. There was no need to provoke an argument. Phil Donahue, they would provoke an argument, and then that began to be the norm. That if you wanted to watch something on TV, it was going to be an argument. Well, now it's really a big argument that we're watching arguments on TV. And I think that stresses us out. So I just think it's just too much. So enough of that. So tonight's topic, and if anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and let me know. But I thought of the idea of really expanding on this topic of too much. Um, do we try, and I'll just ask a lot of questions to set the stage. Like, do we try to do too much in a day? How many of us are reading too many books? How many of us are doing too many therapies? How many of us are switching too many topics, like too many problems in one day, like trying to solve 5 or more problems in a day rather than picking one problem or task and just focusing on it? An example might be if we have problems with the house. So we have a plumbing problem, but we also have a school related problem that we have to attend to. Say, like, it's a homework issue, and so we need to deal with that. The car has a problem. Um, and then there's lawn maintenance, and then there's work, and then there's something at church that needs to be attended to. Maybe it was an email. Um, oh, and I need to go deal with license tabs. Okay. You could be overwhelmed anyway, just by that. Is it all doable? Well, as I was saying the list, each of those looks like maybe a 15-minute task. It could be. License tabs shouldn't be that big. It could be, in theory, 15 minutes to do the lawn maintenance or putting some weed and feed or moss killer. Um, Dealing with the car repair. Okay, someone needs to get it over there. That could be maybe, in theory, 15 minutes to get it there and to switch the car, to get to a place where you dropped it off, and then you do another 15 minutes to pick it up. And in theory, the email might take 15 minutes with the teacher. I think, though, even though if you add it all up, maybe it's 2 hours worth of work, it's just hard on our nervous system. And if we have done too much of too many things, it's just hard on our nervous system. And so here's a thought. Maybe we are a little bit more calculated in how we deal with things. Like, we decide, what needs doing first? And what are these things that are urgent? So, like, teachers like to have things solved sooner than later. The car repair might be important to do. Lawn maintenance, maybe I need to do that on a Saturday. Maybe I need to pace things out. Plumbing wise, I forgot that one. That could be a major one that goes to the head of the list. So those are kind of external things. Here's the other direction, like mentally. How many of us will watch a little bit of YouTube? Okay, YouTube, and I mean, there's other platforms, but YouTube seems to be, well, we're on YouTube now. How many of us watch 4 or more different topics, either educational, political, entertainment, TED Talk, and we may go from one to the other, to the other, to the other? Is that hard on our hardwire? I'm just asking. I wonder if it is that we watch some news. Okay, we see the drama there. Maybe I'll watch something a few months ago, it's like, let's watch something about the coronavirus. Let's watch something about the riots. Let's watch something about the election. What's another topic that was important, that was major, drawing people's attention? Well, the coronavirus, which all had to do with health. Oh, protests. Yeah, no, the protests, which then had some riots. Then I guess another topic is politics. Oh, I guess you could add mask, but some of that's under health. What I'm getting at is that's just overstimulating our nervous system. So perhaps we go, look, tonight I'll focus on politics. I'm not going to deal with masks, or I'm not going to deal with the other things. Or maybe I don't really benefit from knowing this. It's just addictive and attractive. Let's go with something that looks more healthy. Okay, and this happens a lot. And I've done it myself, is say like I'm just going to try to heal myself, but I'm doing 5 to 10 different things all at once. And people go, oh, really? Well, eh, yeah, let's do this. Say like I know the value of exercise. Okay, so that's really important. Good nutrition. Yeah, that's a basic. Maybe I'm going to try to heal myself with supplements. Yep, that sounds good. I'm going to do something 12-step related. Yeah, that's good. So we have that book. But I also know about neuroplasticity. And so we're going to do that. And then on top of this, mindfulness meditation is really good for us to be able to close and to chill. That's 6 things. And some of these are so basic, it seems that could be, um, you know, just basic so that it's not stressful. But I like Kervin's comment, experts say endless novelty overstimulates to our detriment. Novelty. Yeah. Novelty is a really good choice of words there. Thanks for that, because we do like something that's new. I'm easily sold on something. So I will confess, on a positive, I think it's a positive, but um, I've been looking at this book called The Brain's Nat. I think it's The Brain's Natural Way of Healing by Norman Doidge. And I think last week I talked a little bit about Parkinson's. Well, then I'm learning about Moshe Feldenkrais. He was a Jewish physicist who really did some amazing things, then caught up in the war, but discovered that there could be a lot of healing by doing new patterns of behavior, specifically with the body and movement. And it makes perfect sense. We are people, creatures of habit, so we do the same thing over and over in terms of movement. And often that can be negative. It doesn't help us in the long run because we're overusing, we just only have one way to do something. So he'd allow people to experience a different way to move. In today's language, this would cause the brain to grow new brain cells. And he worked with people with stroke, cerebral palsy, dramatic results, dramatic. And so I've known about him for 30 years, but never really listened to him except then. So what was I doing on YouTube? Studying him. In fact, this Friday, I have an intro with a guy right here in Lake Stevens to do a first session to learn how to do it. I went online and practiced some of the experiences. He doesn't like the word exercise because exercise implies you doing the same thing over and over. So I was really finding myself interested in that, but I'm also reading some good spiritual books. I'm also interested, and this is all in 1 week, so I'm confessing here, in the book, well, it's all geared towards this book, on cold laser therapy. Very fascinating. I guess if there's a book to recommend, it would be The Brain's Natural Ways of Healing by Norman Doidge, if you like this stuff. I learned about a Dr. Frederick Kahn, Kahn, Toronto, physician of 20 years, ends up leaving that, he was a vascular surgeon, 20,000 surgeries, successful, very well schooled, and very well respected. But as I guess we could say Providence had it, he had a shoulder problem from a skiing problem. And he then goes to his chiropractor who says, "Hey, I have this old machine. It's from USSR during communism. It's a laser machine." And they use it and he gets better. He starts to study this and realizes that, and this is the science of it, which I find very fascinating. And maybe Curvin's um, use of the word novelty is it's built in our system, is that we like novel things. We also like security and similar things to build in that sense of safety and predictability. But if we get too much of that, we get bored. But what I learned is that our bodies are more transparent than we think. Light penetrates through the skin and changes the chemistry of the blood. It affects our energy levels in terms of ATP, um, adenotriphosphine type, whatever. The doctors would know how to say ATP. I know it ends in triphosphate, but it affects that. It affects mitochondria in the cells. People who have arthritis, arthritic, sore muscles, all kinds of aches and pains, what the light therapy does, there are a whole bunch of diodes. They're expensive units, anywhere from 2,000 to maybe 4,000. But if it really helps your body, it may be worth exploring. It's probably about 25 minutes to an hour where you're letting the light, you just sit there with it. For people who had terrible neurological problems through brain injury, they put the device on. That's what the book emphasizes. And they would end up with amazing changes. And it's not fixing anything, it's just making the cells do what they were meant to do. And that's what I liked about it. So it virtually can't really do any harm, with the exception of if you are a licensed mental health, not mental health, but physician or some kind of healthcare provider. They allow you to have the deep probe wand, which could hurt your eye, but these diodes can't hurt your eye. Yeah. And I mean, maybe there are some safeguards, but it sounds really interesting. So I don't know how I could afford it, but it would be interesting to see what it does. No, if you're interested, you've got to go check it out. It's something to see and experience and to hear the testimonials. And it makes you go, why isn't medicine looking more into this? Talk to my own physician naturopath today, because you need a prescription to get such a device if I were to get such a device. And he says, no, he knew about it and it's totally interesting. So I have that to think about. And as I'm going from task to task, I'm turning on my Audible to listen to that. Had a big use of my brain power to look for an adult family home for my mother. So my brain's kind of doing that. Like I said, I'm doing spiritual reading, which I'm finding fascinating. So I'm doing that. And if I then dip into what's going on politics wise, and I'm dipping into that. And I'll be honest, so with the home repairs, we have windows, screens that need replacing. We need a gutter, needs to be cleaned. We have blinds to get up from a remodel. So we're getting kind of cold now. So there's all these projects, and it's almost as if everybody tries to get through the door, you won't do any of it. And I wonder how many of us, that's what happens, is we're actually overwhelming ourselves with just too much. Um, oh, and there was a prayer I wanted to share. I didn't get it out of the car. But I think I can remember it pretty well. The prayer had something to do with gathering all our thoughts, all the actions, all the worries, all the frustrations, everything that's a issue. It's like gathering it like a bouquet of something. And the word commend, and I thought, wow, it was a first reading of it. And I thought, where's the word commend? And I realized it's to commend all these things to the will of God, to entrust Him with everything that needs to have that happen. And all my thoughts, all my feelings, all my tasks, that if it's too much, it's too much. And I need to whittle it down to what is doable. Only praying for knowledge of God's will and the power to carry it out. Now that's kind of 12-step ish. And will I get instant relief? I'm not sure. Sometimes in my life, I see people get like instant relief. They sleep better just by having this aha, powerful experience. They realize that they can't believe that things are so different than what they thought. But I'd say some of us, it's maybe 30% relief. And in reality, then we shrink back. We don't do what we should be doing. We end up not. I mean, I've done this. I make progress and then I just let it go by the wayside. I go back to the older habits and then I realize, nope, I like this new way of being better. Uh, but I do think that whittling things down makes things better. Here's some things just in our biology of how we're made. We talked a little bit about neuroplasticity. Do you realize brain circuit wise, we have zillions of pathways going on? And I say zillions, I don't mean zillions, but lots when we're young, when we're infantile. There's a process called pruning, which is an important process, just like gardening. If you don't prune or a branch doesn't break, if a branch breaks, it actually sends the energy so the fruit can actually be more usable and fruitful. If we don't prune or have the ability to get rid of the extraneous, we end up with problems. And so it's natural for us to get rid of things we don't need anymore. When we're an infant, we let everything be. We get all these possibilities. And in the book, I'm learning that learning to walk is not by, well, this is funny, not by a learned behavior. We don't learn by training. And it looks like through the research, everybody learns to walk differently from one another, and we almost do it accidentally. So this researcher says that a baby puts their feet in their mouth almost to accidentally learn how to sit upright. And that often they learn to roll over when they see something they want and they reach for it. It's not like I think I'm going to roll over now because it's something I should do or even instinct. It's something that happens accidentally. And life is kind of like that if we are open to this, that we have all these directions we can go, but if we can go towards the things that are most helpful to us, we'll naturally prune the things away that are not helpful to us. And jumping to another topic, but same topic, is that there's the theory that people that struggle with mental illness have too much data, too much stimulation, and that they're overwhelmed. and that if they can prune out, like one of the things is say like hallucination could be a fantasy, but because of lack of sleep and a number of other processes, it feels like it's so real. Most of us would repress it and ignore it, but for those that suffer from mental illness, they can't ignore it because it feels like it's really real. It's a misfiring of the brain. It's very similar to what we've talked about in the past with brain deceptive brain messages, and how do we let go of those and get rid of those things? How do we choose not to think about something? Like, I'm not going to think about this. I'm not going to think anymore about this politic thing or this topic. Enough for me. And I've been pondering this, how to ignore thoughts, how to just, and I guess I could say I've been successful, but I think of it as attributing to God's grace. Um, Once I could see on an EEG a high alpha wave, and this is a system that uses brain mapping, and it's like, wow, I can see that I'm overthinking, too many thoughts. And it's like, okay, I'm just going to let go of those thoughts and try to be in the moment, be with my breathing or something. And then you see that alpha wave go down. It's very validating. And when you can see your brain in action, it really does help a lot. I used to think that it wasn't as important. I thought it was just a fancy thing to be able to look. I can see something. You can just do the exercise without needing to see it. But a wise person told me that when you're really, really, really anxious, if you can see a direct correspondence, some external validation, it really does help. It helps you know that you're kind of on the right path. So, so I woke up a couple of mornings with too many thoughts, and I thought, how do I practically want to deal with this? Well, I could get up and knit. I talked about knitting because I know that that narrows my focus. I could get up and pray because that narrows my focus. I know it does. These things just do that. I think that's why when we're quiet, we have all these thoughts. But if we go do something, we're using brain resources to go cook breakfast. And when we're at our worst, for some of us with anxiety, we can't focus on cooking breakfast. We can't even focus on a favorite movie or a TV show. That horrible alarm nagging system is in the back part of our brain. We just can't deal with it. And that's why we shut down. Depression, we shut down because there's too much stimulation. That's why I like mindfulness, because I think it helps us train our brains to use it teaches us how to train our brains. But I just thought I'm going to lay in bed because I knew that it would benefit me to stay in bed a little bit longer rather than getting up, trying to quiet my mind. And I would say a number of weeks I wasn't able to fall back to sleep, but lately I've been able to fall back to sleep. Yeah, thanks, Jamie, out there. It says, yes, the feelings are so intense that it makes trying to focus on the external so hard. Yeah, so here's what happens is, say like we have a misfiring or a misdirected, it's in a brain that's telling us an alarm system's going off. And like the car alarm metaphor I've used many times probably here is that in the old days, you just look at it and it'd go off. A leaf would fall in the car, it would go off. Hard to ignore it until we actually did learn to ignore it. Like people don't go run and jump when there's a car alarm. No one does. There could be a whole group of people and someone has to say, who has the purple, Miata or whatever, purple. It's not really a color these days for cars. But so if you can identify that my nervous system is overwrought, it's giving me an alarm that's making it hard to focus on my life, those nerves, if you use them over and over and over and over and over, then you've developed pathways for those nerves. It's a major highway. And we have little side roads that help us calm down. But I do know this and I believe this with all my heart, if people expect, actually, I like the metaphor, it's really a good metaphor. Say, like, we've only known one highway and it's just too busy, too much stress. It's going to take some time to plan and engineer a new a new roadway, another highway. In fact, it may be just a regular smaller road, but what happens is if we use it over and over and over and over, they're going to widen that freeway. Or it's not going to be a freeway. They're going to widen that road. This is Hebb's law. If you do something over and over and over, that eventually will become habit. It's just how it works. If I decided, this is silly, but if I decided I had to paint all my notes, that's just how life was going to be. At first, it's going to be like, this is stupid, dipping in watercolor, whatever. But eventually, I'd say about a week, we'd know how to do it. We just would. And if I had to come back to pen, it might feel good, like, wow, that's easier. But say, like, pen writing is stressful, it's nerve-wracking, and I pick a better highway, it's going to grow that. If I don't hop off that endeavor and start doing 5 other things, then I'm not building the new highway anymore, and I'm now building new networks of 5 other things. And then I guess the phrase, I become a jack of all trades, but never really a master of any. And so I think that's the danger with too many therapies, even though they may be well intended, because well, let's look at, and I was talking with someone this week, which was actually quite funny. It was a 12-step saying, and the person said, we've psychoanalyzed ourselves, we've gone to CBT therapist, we have gotten shock treatment, we've done encounter groups, we've had our chakras analyzed, we've been poked with needles to get our meridians aligned. We've gone to nutritionists, we've gone in supplements, we've gone to naturopaths. They didn't add EEG, but we've gone to EEG. We have gone to gastroenterologists. We've gone to brain. Oh, we've taken drugs. We've tried. I mean, you get the point. And it was hilarious. It just went on and on and on and on and on and on and on of all these things. And finally, they get better through just surrendering the whole mess to God and saying, God, please help me. Please help me. And if the tree of knowledge of good of evil could lead us astray, I have this phrase, we're barking up the wrong tree. And we think that it's going to save us, ultimately, like medicine would save us, or science would save us, or psychology would save us, or medications would save us, or nutrition, health and wellness and exercise. And all this stuff is so interesting. But I don't know if that's the best approach, because for some, it becomes almost a religion, and that's all they think life's about. For others, they may do a little bit, but don't get the same experiences. I like to think of these things as gifts that God has given us to use, but it's just a tool. It's not the answer. It's a tool to help me be part of what God wants me to be. So exercise would be a good example of that. The end goal isn't to exercise, it's the process of exercising that helps me stay fit. Supplements are just there to help supplement what is missing in my diet. But people are taking like melatonin. Please help me, doctor. And doctor says take melatonin. Okay. So I'm a weirdo. I say, well, are you deficient in melatonin? In fact, I've had these are true stories. I've had children struggling with hallucinating. Yeah, mental illness. The parents are beside themselves. I say, okay, let's just take deep breaths. Let's look at what's going on. And turns out they didn't sleep well, so they were giving them melatonin. Sometimes it's 10 milligrams. Okay. So then I say, is your child deficient in melatonin? And they go, well, what do you mean deficient? Well, deficient. Melatonin is a hormone. One, I would think in medicine, would only take that hormone if they were deficient in it. And I like doctors, but I think we all can have blind spots. Like, why would doctors just willy-nilly say, take melatonin, without even checking to see if people are deficient? My understanding is that we have lots of melatonin until we're about 40, and then it wanes. And even then, we'd have to ask, should I be taking melatonin after 40? Maybe. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just like we don't know. For these kids, what happens is melatonin is created to help us sleep. If we're having sleep brain waves during the days while our eyes are open, we could be having dreams with our eyes open. When I first looked at this 20 years ago, they said could cause daymares, and I didn't know what a daymare is. Now I think that's what a hallucination may be. So my point is that we just need God's guidance in everything. And then in that, we want to make sure that we're not doing too many things so that we get confused and we get overwhelmed. And then we get discouraged because nothing works. Well, it's just too much. So maybe we try one therapy for a while and just stick with that and give it time for it to work before we switch to something else. Maybe that's what we do. Can you elaborate on what exactly surrender means? I don't really understand what it means. Is it giving up? Is it acceptance? Great question. Boy, thank you, Jamie. I think I read some of this from this book. I am a Christian. I've had experience of surrender. I've read Orthodox literature on surrender. But it does really just assume that you know how to do it. So I'm going to go to these people. And it popped right open to this. So I'm just going to read here and then maybe comment if I can do that without comment. And I might move the words a little bit because we've been doing this in terms of the world events. But it says, being convinced, we're at step 3, which we decided to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood him. Just what do we mean by that? And just what do we do? That sounds like surrender. We're on page 60. Yeah, 60. And as you see, this is well loved in this area here. What is step 3? If we turn our will and our life over to God as we understood him. Just what do we mean by that? And just what do we do? In this, he talks about steps, and I'll just read it. And I think I'll try to emphasize the important parts by slowing down. The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we're almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. Most people try to live by self-propulsion, self-powered. Each person is like an actor or director who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players or actors in his own way. If his arrangements would only stay put, if only people would do as he wished, the show would be great. The whole world would be great. Everybody, including himself, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor or director may sometimes be quite virtuous. He may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. On the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. But as with most humans, he is more likely to have buried traits. What usually happens, the show doesn't come off very well. He begins to think life doesn't treat him right. He decides to exert himself more. He becomes on the next occasion still more demanding or gracious as the case may be. Still, the play does not suit him. Admitting he may be somewhat at fault, he is sure that other people are more to blame. He becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. What is his basic trouble? Is he really not a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrestle satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? Is it not evident to all the rest of the players that these are the things he wants, and do not his actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show? Is he not, even at his best moments, a producer of confusion rather than harmony? So, what we have here is we have to be convinced that my life, the way I'm running it, is not going to be a success. I have to be convinced that if I trust in Erik, it's not going to work. It says most people try to live by self-propulsion. So I have to be convinced that I don't have the power to run myself. It doesn't work if I'm trying to be Erik powered. I do seem to have some element of power, but I think the problem is I need to let go of my power and ask for God's divine energy or power to enable me to do what he wants me to do. Apart from me, you can do nothing. This is step 11. It says later is we pray only for knowledge of God's will and the power to carry it out. It says my motives could be good, but if I'm running on self-will, I mean, here's the thing. This is so deep-seated in me or us. I think my ideas are so good. How can they be wrong? So then I try to have those ideas, and I without realizing it, have a script for the world to follow. You see? I hold my clipboard, and it's a script I have for you, for my family, for the dental people, the government, in fact. And I really have really, really good ideas. And if everybody would just let themselves work with me, this show is going to be great. Just trust me here. Little do I realize that, and it's easier to try to understand surrender by talking about non-surrender. So I do that for a while, and I could really be quite virtuous looking. I could be manipulate to handle the world around me by being kind, which is a godly trait. You know, love is kind. Patient, modest, self-sacrificing. But I also can be mean, egotistical, meaning inflated sense of self, dishonest. Well, the whole process is dishonest with myself, because if I think that my plan really is going to go anywhere, probably not a good idea. And again, this was written to addicts, this was written to alcoholics who really think that their life was going fine. I don't have a drinking problem. Why are you all so worried about this? It goes on. It says our actor is the bottom of page 61. Our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. He is like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine, complaining of the sad state of the nation. That sounds familiar, maybe. I'm not pointing at anyone specifically, but I think we know these people that are having such a happy world in their world, and they're complaining how bad the world is. The minister who sighs over the sins of the 20th century. The politician and reformers who were sure all would be utopia if the rest of the world would only behave. Wow, that sounds familiar. If people would just do as these politicians and reformers, the outlaw safecracker, so the criminal who thinks society is wrong to him and is all locked up. And it says, whatever our protestations, are not most of us concerned with ourselves, our resentments, our self-pity? It is. It's just how it is. It's how we're built. It's part of the disease of sickness, of sin. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. Driven by, I love this phrase, driven by 100 forms of fear. Wow, so fear can have 100 forms? It can. But see, what drives that is selfishness. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. Wow, there's a lot of self there. Self-pity, kind of self-love, self-seeking, meaning I just want to seek the right answers for me. Self-delusion. This could be if I think I'm too bad of a person. I mean, that could be just as delusional thinking I'm too good of a person. The Bible talks about having a wise estimation of yourself. So it says, sometimes they hurt us. Well, okay. So driven by selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles, driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation, but invariably we find that at some time in the past we made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. So the opposite of that is I'm not going to make decisions based on self anymore. I'm just going to make decisions based on whatever God's will is. So there are phrases I know holy people say, may it be blessed. God, your will, not mine, be done. And that's how they live. And it seems too simple, too sweet, too short. But it's true. Like I was in the car this morning. I prayed this prayer, which was so good for me. It's a newer prayer book, which has this prayer in it. I thought, oh, look, something about God's will. And when I prayed it, then I couldn't be upset. Everything is supposed to be part of God's will. I really do believe that this experience of being numb here is part of God's will for me. And to learn to be patient, to have anger and my world, the way I want the world to be rooted out in me. And I knew that this gentleman was not wanting to come at me. Here, could I find your nerve? No, not at all. But that's how we react. We think the world's out to get us. Not all of us, but that would be the victim mentality. Yeah, so being patient can be really good. But deeper than that is this absolute surrender. And even some secular psychologists get at this in ACT therapy, acceptance, radical acceptance. And I think that's where they'll talk about it. So we have to be convinced, before we can give up control, we have to be convinced I am done. I have no more good ideas. And a drug addict, alcoholic, sex addict, food addict, spendaholic, work addict, they often have to have such physical pain that there's nowhere else to go except but up. And There's a phrase used in 12 steps for those that struggle with turning their will and their life over to God. And they say, if you have a trouble with surrendering your life to God or a power other than yourself, um, let's just try a power other than yourself. And that's part of the surrender. It's like, I don't want to run my life anymore. So our troubles in the middle of page 62, we think are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves. Another key phrase, arise out of ourselves. So all my troubles arise out from me. It's not the events in the world. It's not the bad dentists. They're not bad. Even if they were an evil dentist, they're not. But say that they were, it's still, I have no freedom to act or respond any different, because Viktor Frankl, was in a prison camp, said, if we can ascribe meaning to our suffering and it has good use, we will feel better. I'm paraphrasing. And that's our choice, to know, if I see that all things work together for God's good, that this suffering is okay and it's meaningful. And I think that's a lot of the work I do, is to help people ascribe meaning to it. That I think, and I've been there, where in my dark places, I start, and I don't doubt God, thankfully, but I start to wonder if I didn't bring this upon myself, or if there's randomness in the universe, that I get afflicted with whatever. No. And it may take me a while to come full circle to realize God's in control of my life. He loves me more than anybody would ever love me. Why would I ever doubt him? And my misery often is just not having this deep trust in God. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, we alcoholics, or any addict, must be rid of the selfishness. We must, or it kills us. God makes that possible, and there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. So we can't get rid of self in our own strength. It'd be like trying to fight selfishness with selfishness. It says God makes that possible, and there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them, even though we would have liked to. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness by wishing or trying in our own power. We had to have God's help. So it seems that as we surrender and give up ourselves, we abandon ourselves to God, it says. God meets us. And so back to this question of how does surrender experience, it's more an experience. It's hard to teach it. You have to go through it. And then eventually you go, wow, maybe I surrendered, because I start to have God's grace. I'll finish this topic with this, and then I'll maybe address this question we're getting from Jorge here. This is the how and the why of it. One, and I put a 1. First of all, we had to quit playing God. So when I have a script for how I want the world to go, whether it's someone sad dies, I'm upset about that, or why does there have to be suffering in the world, that's me trying to play God. And it never turns out well. It never turns out well. 2, next we decided hereafter in the drama of life, so going back to this play metaphor, God was going to be our director. God was going to be our director. He is the principal. We are his agents. He is the father, and we are his children. Most good ideas are simple. Simple, simple, simple. If I'm complicating it, I'm probably not surrendered. That's another little litmus test to see if I'm surrendered or not. If I'm trying to control something, And this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch through which we pass to freedom. Here's what tells us, um, how do we know when something happens? When we sincerely, keyword sincerely, took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. We had a new, and I see this every month, maybe every month, maybe that's exaggerating, but many times a year, someone decides to surrender to God. I get to witness it or hear about it, that they had no background on God and maybe they're in recovery and they go, sure, whatever. And they do this and they go, I don't know how to, this is how they talk. I don't know how to put my finger on this. Keyword finger. I'm letting go. God is helping me, I think. I can't put words to this. It's ineffable. And they start to feel lighter. I had a gentleman say, I just feel lighter. When something's happening to me, and it's like, then I share the verse about the burdens that we have on us, and that Jesus' burden, his yoke is easy and his burden is light. And the verse after that is, come learn of me, for I am meek and lowly. So it says we had a new employer, capital E, being all powerful. So again, there's that word power. He provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. So there's two aspects. We need to keep close to him. How do we do that? Through prayer and surrender. Brokenheartedness, it says God is close to the brokenhearted. It says draw near to God and he will draw near to you. So just try to get near to God. Perform his work well. What is his work? Well, Jesus is, and it sounds preachy here, but I'm going a little bit fast, but it is works. Any relationship requires work. I can't just sit back and let my wife do everything. It takes works to communicate, to pray, to connect. The reality is God's work of what he imparts to the relationship is so astoundingly beyond what I have to offer. It feels like he is doing everything, which I could say, but it's not that I didn't have to cooperate with him. And so if I just lean back and just expect him to do it all, it doesn't work that way. But I can't work towards God. That's not surrendered, and I'm going to be very sad and frustrated. He provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. Established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. We just lose interest in me having a plan. More and more became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. So it becomes less selfish. What can I offer? As we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, as we became conscious of his presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. We were reborn. See, I talked last week, maybe the week before, on how do we use the steps for dealing with the pandemic, the election, the civil unrest, anything really in our life. It applies to everything really. And it's this: if I'm going to fight, I'm going to survive the coronavirus or the civil unrest or economic collapse or anything in my own strength. Yeah, no. The best that I have to offer is to turn my will over to God and to say, God, it says, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them would bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. And then we usually finish with thy will, not mine, be done. Now, relieve me of the bondage of self sounds kind of Buddhist. And Buddhism, I'm not an expert in it. I have friends that are, and I think that Christianity and Buddhism is on separate paths. It's just my experience and belief. But I would say that where it's interesting is that they do acknowledge that it's the self that causes us suffering and our problems. And it says we that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to Him. So um, just about 2 pages, and very powerful there, and just a lot there. Jorge, let's see here. Hi, can someone smoke marijuana and have a good relationship with God and keep a family healthy emotionally and other important areas? Good question. I might address it in the future, but I like to address things simply. I'll explain. I am a drug and alcohol counselor too. I mean, I really do see things from that point of view. So, statistically or demographically, people are going to come in telling me about the downsides of how better living through chemistry didn't really help them. A lot of the people were suffering from anxiety and found that even some of the oils, and I mean, they were trying hard, but often it made things worse. I do think that marijuana is a substance and that make people go, well, of course it is. But a lot of people that talk about it talk as though it really won't have any down effects, which it does have down effects, which I have a couple of naturopathic friends that are into using it medicinally. And some of the work is they're trying to use it for PTSD. PTSD sufferers have too strong a memory. They remember that event over and over and over and over. And so we do know that marijuana does have an effect where it does weaken memory in the hippocampus. So do I see a lot of people struggle with memory loss with it? Yeah. Do I see people that have troubled relationships wise? Well, the people that aren't smoking marijuana do complain that they're kind of numb. They're just not really emotionally there. It'd be like alcohol, but you could do this with a number of other substances too. Um, there are people that say I only use it to help my chronic ear infections, or I only use it for my um, back pain. Sometimes these people have spouses that are addicts, and so I'd be concerned about that because it's numbing themselves. But maybe someone uses it once a month. It does have an effect on the brain, a downside as well as maybe a positive, but for them. But how much of an effect um, on the family, and how much an effect would it be on the relationship with God and with family and emotionally, um, is up to that person to have to figure out. Let's just tweak it just slightly to make it really. Let's say that, can someone drink alcohol and have a good relationship with God and keep a family healthy emotionally and other important areas? It seems like a lot of people could. It seems that in and of itself, alcohol, I think it's even mentioned in the Bible. Could alcohol cause a problem in the relationship with God? Yes, it can. We have lots of data on that and how it doesn't work. Can it make a family really emotionally unhealthy? Yes, we know this for sure. Um, so what happens in reality is people come to counseling and try to sort that out. And my job is to kind of help them sort it out. I don't tend to want to stamp someone and say, well, you're an alcoholic, and don't do that, because that doesn't help. If people go, you know what, I don't think I can do this anymore. So I take the same approach with marijuana, although depending on how busy I am, I may go, I'm so busy. And they want to do this neurofeedback. It's like, I've got to only take those people that are all ready to do it, that aren't doing other things that could impede the process. But say, like, I'm working with someone, and a lot of people, I have a number of people where they're just become self-evident that they really can't smoke marijuana and not have it affect their life. And a lot of these people are using it every single day. And they realized after they've gotten rid of that in their life that they're really kind of cranky at first. They kind of have vomiting problems. Well, it's an antiemetic. It helps you with nausea. And so when you don't have that, your body has adapted to that. So then you have more nausea. Not everybody's going to have the same effect. Once they get past that, we could call it detox, then they start to get alive again. Now, part of it is they're doing other things like therapy, neurofeedback. They go, I never want to use again. I know a person who, I don't want to identify them too much, but I'll twist some numbers around, like 30 plus years of using marijuana every single day, had a number of problems, a number of problems. Well, I guess it's generic, like anxiety, um, poor sleep, just very difficult situations. And they do neurofeedback, and their biggest surprise is they're not thinking of even using marijuana in the slightest. Now, not everybody's going to have that effect, but it's just not there. Um, that's kind of interesting. I think if a person can find other ways to help, whatever a person's using marijuana for, find alternative ways that don't harm the brain so much, you're better off. Um, Marijuana is an interesting chemical because it seems to affect judgment in a different way. And I think this is an honest appraisal. And it sounds like I'm putting it down, but you guys can be the judge of some of this. Like, if I ask someone who's an alcoholic who really struggles with alcohol, would you let a brain surgeon do surgery after drinking? They go, no, no. An opiate addict, would you want someone to use opiate? No, no. Cocaine? No, no. What other addiction? Cocaine, speed? No, no. Shrooms? No. Marijuana? They might say yes. And they might go down the path of saying, but it's so healthy for us. We'd all be better. It's almost like a vitamin. So I'm kind of suspicious of that mentality. Like, I had two women the last year. Could I get in trouble? Well, it's generic enough, but they're pregnant and smoking marijuana. Well, I don't see that as safe for their child. Both occasions, they told me that their naturopathic midwife said it was fine. And it's like, yeah, I don't believe that for an instant. Let's be scientific here. Show me the research. I just said politely, show me the research. They both suggested that the medicine that they could give for nausea would be better, the worse than the marijuana. It's like, but we don't have the research on that. So I do think that it affects judgment a lot. Um, Now, Aaron brings up really good point, and this goes back 30 years for me, is that when I worked in hospitals, um, I might have showed this before, I knew I would see schizophrenia. I knew I would see bipolar. What surprised me is that I would see people who had used psychedelics or drugs, and their brain is now kind of tweaked a certain way. And yeah, no, that was unfortunate. And I'll say this, the staff, who's usually pretty caring, goes, well, there's nothing we can do. There was this attitude, if you broke your brain, what can be done? Um, yeah, it's kind of, so I know people who have used marijuana that had bad experiences. And the people who hear this go, well, it must have been something else, not the marijuana. Well, okay. But they're stuck now. One guy was 7 years. If you talked about a certain topic, he really was so afraid of that. because it would reactivate this hallucinatory experience. Um, so I think even if it's going to be used medicinally, one has to ask the question, um, why aren't doctors telling people about the side effects? I'll kind of go on a little bit of a rant because I think it's important to get my experience out there. So I work with people that are coming in with some serious anxiety and these challenges, and their doctors, they tell me, oh, know that they smoke marijuana every day, but are giving them other drugs. And it's like, do you know what the effects of mixing marijuana with these drugs are? No. So it's purely making up stuff. And I tend to have a policy: if people have problems, let's take away anything that could be causing the problem, not just add something to make it go away. Again, this is this melatonin thing. Take away something else that could be, cell phone devices deprive you of melatonin. Blue screens do that. For every 15 minutes of blue light, it affects melatonin levels. So, yeah, so I'd be concerned about that. The whole question is, how does God interact with marijuana? It does seem that it feels like it's a new thing, like it's been more acceptable. But prior to this, at least in America, it was unacceptable. It was not considered a safe drug. And we just don't see anything in the Bible talking about how it can be used in a positive way, like it's going to help our relationship with God. If it was really there, we have verses that say wine makes glad the heart of men, but we don't have verses that talk, and it says, be not filled with too much wine, but be filled with the Holy Spirit. Do not be drunk with wine. So I'm concerned about mood altering substances. But it's a really good question because I think we have to be careful. I'll say this: I knew an Orthodox Christian monk who asked me about marijuana, and he was talking about it in the context of what I thought and medical stuff. And I kind of said, well, it's one of those things I haven't. I think we get into trouble if we just slam a door shut on having a discussion about it. I think either way, kind of, wow. The same thing is, if we got in marijuana camps, isn't this is debated as politics, but if two parties can't begin to talk to each other about something, I think we get into trouble. So anyway, boy, did this go long, I think. But it's been good to talk with you. Thank you for all the nice comments. And I wanted to comment on Kervin's post here. This morning I woke with burdens on my mind. Before I got out of bed, I verbally thanked God for evidence of his grace in recent days. It seemed to especially prepare me for the day. Thank you, Kervin. That is a good way to kind of wrap this up, is that in the midst of the troubles we face, if we look for evidence of God's mercy, if we look for evidence of his holy care, his power, as we humble ourselves to him and ask that his will be manifested in our life, it will turn out all great. And it does. We know it's going to turn out all great anyway. And this sounds challenging, but do we want to be a part of that? And we have that choice. So I think we all can be part of that. We just turn our hearts and our wills over to the care of God as much as we can. And Anne Smith, who was the wife of Dr. Bob, ended things with this, who was part of this. She says, let's try to surrender of much of our life to God as much as we begin to know him as we can. And she says it better than I'm saying that. So, well, have a great night, you guys, and take care, and we'll see you next week. Love you. Bye-bye.